Hi, my name is Timea, and today I will be presenting our study into the effects of a soundtrack on board game player experience. Our motivations for this study were threefold. First, we observed an industry trend of implementing digital technologies into board games, which is a historically analog medium. Second, we found existing publications regarding the functions of these technologies, alongside board game players' feelings towards them. And finally, we found there is a lack of knowledge regarding the effects of these technologies to player experience. We decided to focus on one of the many functions technology can provide in a board game, and we chose sound because our previous research into board game immersion revealed that sound and music were often voluntarily used by players to enhance a game's thematic setting, but also because sound is a much researched aspect of video game player experience. Based on these, we asked the following questions. Does music make the game more enjoyable? Does music make the game more tense? And finally, does music make the game more thematic? Due to the pandemic, we chose to conduct our study remotely and recruited 14 participants in co-located pairs. 9 of these players identified as hobbyists, meaning that these participants consider board gaming their hobby and play regularly, whilst 5 players were identified as more casual players who were aware of modern board games, but play less frequently and do not consider board gaming their hobby. We chose the board game called Fuse, which has a theme of defusing bombs planted on a spaceship, based on the following criteria. The game has an official soundtrack app, ensuring that the music and sound effects are aligned with the game's theme. It is real-time, meaning that players all play at the same time, eliminating waiting time before turns. It has a fixed length, so there is a consistent match between the soundtrack and gameplay. And it has a 10-minute playtime and low rules complexity, allowing for multiple play sessions whilst reducing the risk of fatigue. The goal of the game is to solve dice-based puzzles on cards representing bombs before the timer runs out and, according to the setting of the game, the spaceship explodes. The soundtrack of the game has a mixture of high-tempo background music, thematic sound effects imitating a ticking bomb, and voice-narrated time announcements every minute of gameplay. So for this study, we conducted a within-subject design where participants played the game in 3 formats. Once in which there was no sound at all, once in which there were voice-narrated time announcements only, and once where both the time announcements and music were present. After each playthrough, participants filled out a tailored version of the intrinsic motivation inventory, which is a standardized questionnaire to measure enjoyment and tension. We also formulated an additional 4 questions to measure how thematic the experience was for players. These were based on our previous research into board game immersion, where thematic experiences were described as a result of concepts like inhabiting the game world, in this case feeling like they were on a spaceship, or feeling a sense of embodiment within the actions carried out in the game, such as feeling like defusing bombs, or identifying with in-game characters, such as feeling like a bomb technician, and finally, caring about the outcomes of the narrative of the game, in our case, feeling responsible for the survival of the crew. Both the IMI and our own questions asked players to rate their experiences on a 7-point Likert scale. Finally, we also conducted an after-experience interview with participants to collect more subjective data regarding the differences between the 3 playthroughs. We analyzed our data from the IMI questionnaire with a repeated measures ANOVA test and found that a soundtrack, where both music and time announcements were present, made the game more enjoyable and more tense when compared to playing with only the time announcements or without any sound. When it comes to how thematic each playthrough was for players, we analyzed our data question by question, and we used the Wilcoxon sign rank test. We found that for questions 1, 2, and 4, where players were feeling like they were on a spaceship, feeling like they were defusing bombs, or feeling like the ship's survival depended on them, The results were statistically significant in favor of the soundtrack, so the music and time enhancements together. However, for question 3, feeling like they were real bomb defusal technicians, there was no statistical significance between conditions. It is also worth noting that, rating their experience from 1 to 7, the highest ranking items were still scored under 3, which means all answers across conditions were quite low for the game's thematic feel. We gained more insight into this through our interviews, for which we conducted a reflexive thematic analysis where a common theme amongst participants was that the music and time enhancements together made the player experience more atmospheric when compared to just the time enhancements or silence. However, we also found that in most cases, an atmospheric experience did not equal a thematic experience. Our analysis revealed that for a game to become thematic, in addition to the soundtrack, players expected the game components to also reflect the game's theme more closely, alongside expecting more detailed narrative around the game's theme. We found that players, regardless of being casual or hobbyist, all had a concept of what a thematic game was, and this concept was similar amongst players, regardless of whether or not they thought that theme was important in a board game. When asked to describe playing the game with each of the conditions, players most commonly referred to their playthrough with both music and time enhancements as intense, dramatic or tense, where tension was regarded both positively or negatively, depending on the participant. For their playthrough with time enhancements only, players used positive descriptors such as useful. However, some participants found the voice clinical or even annoying. For their playthrough without any sound at all, players often described their experience as empty or lazy. However, some participants found the lack of tension relaxing. So to summarize, we found that the presence of a soundtrack made the experience more enjoyable and more tense, and players regarded the soundtrack as a positive addition, agreeing that it added something to the experience. Most players described music and sound as providing atmosphere. However, atmosphere in itself did not make the game more thematic without other aspects of the game also reflecting the theme better. Thank you.